following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello and welcome to Perspectives. My name is David Schoneman. I'm your host on this program, and I'm the Alderman for Ward 3 here in Nashua. On Perspectives, we take a look at a variety of issues that are very important to Nashua residents and taxpayers on a state, local, and even a national level. We do this because we want you to be able to participate in the conversations as occasion arises, and we also want you to be able to vote with knowledge and with wisdom when Election Day comes around every November. Today we're going to take another look at a very important issue here in Nashua, and that's public education. Public education, of course, includes the standard government schools that you might be familiar with and perhaps some of your children attend. That would be the 2 high schools, the 3 middle schools, and of course any one of the number of elementary schools that we have here in the city. But public education, publicly funded education, also includes charter schools here in Nashua and throughout the state. In my conversations with various folks in Ward 3 regarding charter schools and public education, I've heard people say that they believe that charter schools are in fact private schools or have entrance exams that are very tough to pass and actually charge parents tuition. This is not true in any case. Charter schools are publicly funded schools funded by state tax dollars, your tax dollars sent to the state. There are no entrance examinations, and there is no tuition charge to parents. Charter schools, however, are very high in demand, and so there is a limited seating availability, and most of the charter schools have a waiting list. Here in Nashua, for instance, we have the Academy for Science and Design, and the Academy for Science and Design does have a waiting list, and if you wanted your child to go there, you would have to fill out an application, not take a test, but fill out an application and then be entered into the lottery. If your child's number came up, he or she would be granted admission. So charter school is a publicly funded school, and we also have some very good results from them. They perform very well academically, generally, and provide a tremendous value to taxpayers. For instance, once again, the Academy for Science and Design right here in Nashua is by design the #1 high school in the state, #1 in academic performance in the entire state of New Hampshire. And they deliver this excellent performance at a very low cost to taxpayers. The average or the standard cost per pupil for the Academy for Science and Design is between $6,000 and $7,000 per year. And we can contrast this performance and these numbers with the standard government schools here in Nashua. The Nashua School District is not as great a performer. In fact, we're not #1. We are, unfortunately, the number 100th school district in the state out of 125. On academic performance, and that puts us in the bottom 20% in the state. On top of that, the cost to send a pupil to the Nashua School District is between $12,000 and $13,000 per year. That's for non-special ed. If we were to roll special ed into the equation, the cost per pupil would be much higher. So we have a charter school that is #1 in the state at about half the price of the standard government school. Today we're going to talk about a piece of legislation that was recently introduced to the Board of Aldermen with its first reading just this week that provides an incentive to charter schools and helps to alleviate some of the financial hardship that they face with the small amount of money they're actually given. Charter schools, as you may or may not know, actually pay rent for the facilities, and they also pay property taxes on the facilities that they rent. Of course, the standard public schools do not pay any property taxes. There's a move to perhaps alleviate some of the tax burden for the charter schools by offering them an abatement of sorts. And with me today to talk about this is the prime sponsor of this legislation, Ward 5 Alderman and State Representative Don Lebrun. Don has been on the Board of Aldermen since being elected for the first time to this position last year in 2015, and has served well these few months that he's been on the board as part of this new term. He's also been a state rep for 6 years, 3 terms, and serves on various committees that affect our lives on a daily basis. Don, welcome. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me, David. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. So let's talk about this legislation, some of the background. You have an interest in charter schools. You see that they perform well and give great service to taxpayer, yet
Right.
they have a financial burden that the public schools don't face. Tell us about it and what the impetus for this legislation is.
The money that the state gives the charter school is not equal to what they give to your public schools. So they start out under that burden. They also pay much less for their teachers. The education, the quality of the education, in my opinion, is far superior to what we get at our other public school. I thought about this legislation because last July, the state passed a RSA that the cities and the towns could pick up an option to give a tax break to the charter schools if it so chose, which meant that I had to submit the legislation and request the city to do just that. That's the genesis of the proposal. I've toured the charter schools. I've toured the Academy of Science. I've toured the Mini Society. I'm totally impressed with what I see there compared to what I see when I tour the public schools. The students are so much more committed. They're so much more structured. And therefore, the product that they get out of it is much more quality.
I agree completely. I've also toured Academy for Science and Design a couple times, and I've been through all the schools in Ward 3, and I've been through a number of the others. I serve on the Joint Special School Building Committee, and that's a committee that along with Construction Projects Committee, facilitates making improvements to the facilities that we have at the various schools. So I've toured a number of schools. We have our meetings in National High School North for that particular committee, so I'm there once a month anyway. So I, too, share your opinion on that. In fact, I was so impressed by what I saw at Academy for Science and Design compared to what I saw at our regular public schools that I asked the teachers, or asked the administrator who was giving me the tour, do the kids come to the school with this kind of commitment, or do you foster that? Do you cultivate that here? And their answer is, and I believe it, they foster it and cultivate it there. I think that as a flight instructor myself,
I think it goes hand in hand, though. I think the kids come there with a better attitude than they go to your regular public schools. I think the kids come there wanting to learn everything they can, and therefore the administrators foster that.
I see. Are you suggesting then that kids that go to the regular public schools don't really want to be there, don't want to learn?
I'm not saying they don't want to learn. I'm saying that I don't feel, for various reasons, that the structure is there from the administrators.
I see.
I believe the two go hand in hand. If you're going to teach someone something, first they have to want to do it. Then you have to be adequate in doing the actual teaching in order to get the product that you're looking for. And I think that's what the charter schools have.
I see. Would you suggest perhaps that a teacher can motivate a student to learn?
Oh, absolutely.
I taught undergraduate statistics when I was a graduate student at Boston University a number of years ago. And one course that I had to teach was a core required course in business statistics. Not exactly exciting stuff. And many of those students that came in there really didn't want to be there, but they had to be there because it was a core requirement. And part of my job as a teacher there was to somehow get them into it well enough so that they could learn it and perform well so that they could go on and do whatever they want to do after they graduated.
And that's what I see at the charter schools. That's exactly what I see.
And they do hire excellent teachers. Much is made about how we need to pay teachers more in our regular public schools. And I did a little research on that because, of course, a teacher's contract is coming up pretty soon. And the average salary for an excellent teacher in the charter school is far less than the salaries we're paying.
It is. It's
our
probably
teachers.
15 to 20% less, something like that.
Right, and there's no pension?
No.
The benefits aren't going to be the same. There's a 401k, for instance, at the Academy for Science and Design, but there's no contribution from the employer.
That's right.
It's 100% funded. Now, it's available And I've worked in places where 401k was available to me, but there was no match, and this is the case there. So the benefits and the salary package is much less generous, yet they're still able to find excellent teachers, because you don't become the #1 school in the state without excellent teachers.
That's right.
You have to have good people
That's
there.
right. And the fact that you mentioned that our public schools are 100th in ranking,
Yes.
you know, that tells you something. Why can a charter school be #1 and your public schools be 100? I mean, that's quite a disparity.
It's quite a disparity. And it's not like it's a different demographic necessarily. They're right here in Nashua.
Right.
And anybody who applies,
They can almost see each other.
they can almost see each other. And anyone who applies can get in Academy for Science and Design. There's no entrance exam. There is a waiting list, and there's a lottery. But if that number comes up, and once you're in, by the way, you're in the next year too. You're not in a lottery every single year. Once you're in the program.
And they do not pick and choose one student over another. When the lottery number comes up, it doesn't matter whether it's a special ed student or a regular student.
That's right.
That number comes up, that's the student that comes in.
And so the Academy for Science and Design, along with other charter schools, gets between $6,000 and $7,000, I understand.
That's right, about half of what the
half.
state pays for your other public schools.
So they're performing a great service for the taxpayer. If those same students were to be stuck back in regular public school, the cost per year for these pupils would be double.
It would skyrocket.
Yes. And so the Academy for Science and Design has a waiting list to get in. I forgot what the number is, but it's probably a couple of hundred. It's important to remember that someone who's on a waiting list to get into the Academy for Science and Design or other charter schools is on a waiting list to get out of the regular public schools.
Yes.
And I think the more we can do to facilitate the charter school movement, I think the better off we're going to be. It's good for education, it's good for students, and it's good for taxpayers. So
they've proven their worth over and over again. And again, I got to reiterate the product that they're turning out. I get letters from charter school children. They're unbelievable. They're not form letters. They write their own letter. I feel so good about them when I read them that I have to answer them and thank them for writing the letter themselves.
Right.
And it shows just what they are learning, you know, how they're structured and how they're able to do these things. And I get letters from other public school children and from Adult Learning Center and whatnot, and there is such a difference in them.
There's such a difference. There was an article, I think in Union Leader, it might have been the Telegraph, it was around 2011, 2012, going back there a little ways. It was talking about Nashua Community College and the students that came out of Nashua public schools, regular public schools, not charter schools, into Nashua Community College, and the fact that 70% of those students entering Nashua Community College needed remedial training in math and English.
That's right.
And contrast that to the experience you have of receiving a well-written letter, probably with good penmanship too.
Absolutely.
From somebody at the charter school.
And in cursive.
And in cursive.
And in cursive.
Which shows what a student is capable of.
Yeah.
I have a lot of faith in the potential of all of our students, whether they're from wealthy families or families that face some financial hardships, whether they're high IQ or normal, whether they're physically standard or if they're special ed in any way.
Yeah.
But there's a tremendous amount of potential that's available in every human mind. And I think a school can certainly draw that out, and a charter school certainly do that very well. So this is legislation. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So this is legislation that's going to, that if passed, will provide some financial relief to these schools, which will enable them maybe to take some of the money that they're paying on property tax and maybe apply that to more materials or
more
salaries.
Teacher salary, or whatever. You know, I'm not bad-mouthing the public schools.
No, of course.
I just don't think the disparity between the $6,000 or $7,000 in a charter school and the $13,000 for public school, I just don't think, for some reason, we're not getting our bang for the buck.
We're not getting our bang for the buck. And let me share something that I read. I think it's a very interesting question. I think we're going to see interesting debate. You've already spoken to at least one alderman who said that he's adamantly against this legislation, yet the charter schools provide such great education.
But I also have 3 others that are willing to support it.
That's right. I'm one of them.
And you're one of them.
Alderman Siegel is another one.
Alderman Siegel and
Tom Lopez.
Alderman Lopez, yes.
Yes. So you were the prime sponsor.
Yes.
And you have now 3 co-sponsors.
Right.
And we're looking forward to discussing this in public. I think it's gonna say a lot. This editorial I have
And we need for the public to be aware that there is a public hearing coming up on it, and that will be posted on the city website or wherever around town. And I encourage the public to be there.
I certainly
to
would
speak, whether it's in favor of it or against it. But I would like to see a lot of public input.
Well, I will tell you that we have a very good PTO organization at Mount Pleasant School. In fact, one of the leaders of the PTO, a neighbor of mine, spoke out very adamantly about the facilities at Mount Pleasant School. And with that organization and with the effort and the willingness they have to voice their opinions, they're getting things done. And there's going to be some improvements made to the physical plant at Mount Pleasant School, which is very important, based on the involvement of this PTO. And I really hope that the PTO comes out. I can share one other number.
I hope they do something with Mount Pleasant, because that is a deplorable situation there. Has been for many years without much being done. And, it's not conducive to learning at all, period.
It's not conducive to learning at all, period. And I will tell you this, as much as we have a ranking for our school district, each individual school also has a ranking. Out of 198 elementary schools in the state of New Hampshire, 198, Mount Pleasant comes in 182nd.
Wow, that's pathetic.
There's a 5-star rating that can be given. Mount Pleasant gets 0 stars. And this is based on information that's compiled by the New Hampshire Department of Education, based on test scores, and also from the U.S. Department of Education. These are not numbers I make up. These are numbers that are published. I've downloaded reports. These are available online.
I have seen the same numbers.
We have one school. I will give an accolade here to the Bicentennial Elementary School. They're number 8 in the state. Number 8 in the state. Very, very good. They get a 5-star rating. But the average for all of the Nashua elementary schools is only 1.75 stars. And Mount Pleasant gets 0 stars. Fairgrounds Elementary, 0. Lead Street School, 0. Dr. Crisp School, 0. Amherst Street School, another school in my ward, just gets 1 star. They're 178th out of 198. These are deplorable. High schools, not much better. We have Nashua North and Nashua South. Nashua North is 57th out of 77. Nashua High School South is number 76 out of 77. And of course, as a reminder, Academy for Science and Design is number 1 out of 77. Let me share this editorial.
You know one big difference also, David? Your charter schools, you don't walk in the door and see a huge atrium. You don't see all sorts of assembly rooms and things like that. You walk in, you see classrooms or cubicles with students in them. It's bare basics, because that's not necessary.
They're focusing on education.
They're focusing on education.
Not all the rest of it.
Not the aesthetics.
Not the aesthetics, yep.
You walk into Nashua North or Nashua South, and you've got all this wasted space.
It looks like a
college.
college.
To me, it's wasted space. It looks like a college.
Like a private college.
And, all of that costs money.
It costs a lot of money.
It costs money to heat it. It costs money to clean it.
Yep.
It costs money to maintain it.
That's right. That's right. We have unions, too, of course. And the custodian union contract has been a big topic here in the city. And whatever a person feels about it, we should keep them or not keep them. However they feel about it, we do know that a private contractor would cost quite a bit less than the union, which means that with our union salaries, for right or wrong, we're paying way above market rate for those standard services. And that could be true for administrators. We know it's true for teachers based on comparison to excellent teachers at the charter schools. So we're paying an awful lot for an education system that's not delivering. And why are we doing that? Let me share this. I do want to get to this. This is from the Telegraph on March 16th, Wednesday, March 16th. It's an editorial. It's an editorial. It's not a guest editorial. It's the actual Telegraph staff. And they used a phrase that was quite interesting. This is about the Croydon case. The Croydon case you're probably familiar with. Maybe not as many people in Nashua are. It had to do with school choice in a very small town, could tax dollars be used to send a child to a Montessori school, non-religious private school,
Right.
if the town didn't have the ability or didn't have a school? And Croydon was doing that very successfully, but they got in trouble with the State Department of Education, and they kind of cracked down on them, and Croydon won the case. So this editorial is about Croydon, but I think it applies to charter school in a particular phrase they used. I'm going to quote here from the second column of this. The real issue, and this is again from the Telegraph on March 16th, the real issue is that the actions in Croydon are seen as a threat to the educational industrial complex, which would account for the presence of the New Hampshire Education Commissioner, Virginia Berry, in the courtroom. That would be the same educational industrial complex that fought tooth and nail for years to prevent charter schools from gaining a toehold in the state for fear they would siphon off money from public schools. Goes on to say, there is plenty of evidence to suggest that the education received by too many students in normal government-approved schools is far from adequate, certainly in comparison to charter schools.
Right.
Of course, the phrase educational industrial complex is drawn from President Eisenhower's farewell speech when he used the phrase and warned Americans against the rise of the military-industrial complex.
Mm-hmm.
This was in the wake of World War II, where America had to industrialize very quickly to succeed in that conflict. And he was saying that we have to be careful about an industry that will become so focused on its own survival and continuing to collect the stream of tax dollars that they would forget about the need to provide a cost-effective service to the American taxpayer.
Mm-hmm.
And the Telegraph here, I think, is making a comparison between that warning against a military-industrial complex to what we have here, educational industrial complex.
Right.
And I would call it a public educational industrial complex
Right.
that seems to be more focused on its own survival than they are in providing a good education or cost-effective service. Along come the charter schools, and the educational industrial complex stands very strongly against any improvement that would show them up. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are, if the state is mandated to pay a certain amount of money per pupil for an education, what difference does it make what school they go to? Why shouldn't that money follow that student into whichever school? Mm-hmm. It's all the same pot of money, but the public schools, the regular public schools, don't want that money to follow the student.
Right.
They want to keep that money within their budget in order to continue whatever way they want to.
Well, I think to ensure their own survival.
To ensure their own survival, yeah.
And here we have a school district that it counts for half of Nashua's budget, over $100 million.
Mm-hmm.
It's right around just over $100 million this year.
I think it's actually about 47% of the budget.
But very close to half.
Yeah.
$100 million were in the bottom 20% in the state, and the cost per pupil is double what it is at another school right here in Nashua. That's number one in the state. Yeah. These are problems that we need to address. I've heard people say that, well, the education system is broken and the Fed's got to fix it or the state level's got to fix it. I don't think they do. I don't think they can. I think where it's going to get fixed, it's going to be right here at a local level.
I would say so.
Whether here in Nashua or whatever town, because this is the last place, I think, that taxpayers are still represented. And if taxpayers come out in support of your legislation, for instance, to channel more of a very limited supply of money into the education that's provided by charter schools, I think it's a benefit. It's a benefit to the student. And
it's still not moving the mandated money. What I'm proposing is the tax break so that there is more money within the charter school. More money that they already have to spend. But let them spend it on the education and not on the property tax level.
Exactly. Especially since if we want to talk about leveling a playing field, the regular public schools don't pay property tax.
Right.
And can you imagine what the property tax would be on National High School North, for instance?
Oh, my
you see
God.
the playing fields, and I'm all for athletics and all that.
And the entire campus.
The entire campus there.
And the same here at the South.
Yes.
Same here at South.
So I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I'm very excited about this legislation because I think it's going to begin to pull that conversation into the forefront.
I hope so. That's my intention.
Well, it's a good intention because we're going to be facing the budget cycle here. We're really at the entry level of it here, and with the pension fund legislation not passing the other night, being put back down to committee, the the funds that would have been available for more spending, just more spending, more spending, more spending, are not going to be present most likely.
Right.
And so there's going to be some hard discussions that we have to have regarding budgets, particularly for the school system, which, as you say, is about 47%.
Well, that pension bill is another. I don't think the public is quite aware of what that additional appropriation, how that would work out over the next couple of years, and what it would mean for the tax base in the next couple of years.
Well, once we have a supplemental appropriation like that and go over the cap, that number stays there.
Yeah.
Because that number becomes the basis for fiscal 17, and then that number becomes the basis for fiscal 18,
Right.
and that $2 million that gets added, it's there forever.
Yeah.
It never goes away.
I had a similar situation at the county level a few weeks ago. If you, and to use very small round numbers, if you give a pay raise of 4% for 2 years, that's less money than if you give a 2% pay raise each year. Because the second year, it's 2% of a higher rate.
Right, you got compounding going on in
That's
there.
right.
Yeah,
That's
that
right.
affects us. It's a big effect. Regarding the educational industrial complex, I also want to point out that public information is available that shows who gets what for political donations. I did a little bit of research on that today, and you expressed, do you mind saying which alderman was against this legislation?
Alderman O'Brien was against it.
Alderman O'Brien was against it. In 2015, a campaign in 2015, Michael O'Brien received $500 from the National Teachers Union. The National Teachers Union, along with other unions, makes donations to political candidates that they favor, who they believe will favor them.
I've received zero from the NEA.
I don't receive any money from any of the groups, and it's not that I don't support the effort. I'm not saying I don't support schools. I'm not saying I don't support police or
absolutely.
fire
We all
department.
support schools.
We all
It's
support.
all
We all
about
support education.
educating our children.
That's right, but we don't.
But we want the best education for our children also.
That's right. We don't want to be guided by where it really becomes a special interest
That's right.
as part of, in this case, a public educational industrial complex.
Right.
Don, we are nearly out of time here, if you can believe it.
Already?
Already. Anything else you want to add?
We haven't gotten into health care.
All right, well,
You know, we're
we'll
working-
have to have you back.
We're how much time do we have?
We got 14 seconds.
Oh, well, never mind. We won't go into health care, other than to say we are about to implement phase 2 of the Medicaid managed care.
Okay.
So next time we'll go into that.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you very much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank
It's
you,
great,
David.
and thank you for the legislation. I think it's wonderful. We're going to have some great discussions that's going to begin to raise the issue of the quality of education and the cost of education to national taxpayers. And this is very important to the folks at home.
It is. I think people want the best bang for their buck that they can get.
They really do. I'm a Walmart shopper. I'm not saying education needs to be Walmart, but I go there because when I'm done shopping at Walmart, I got more money left for other things I want to do.
That's absolutely
And
right.
that's the same with taxpayers,
Absolutely.
with education. If we can get a good education, like we get at the charter school, for half the price we're paying now, imagine if our school budget went from $100 million down to $50 million.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money.
Folks, my name is David Schoneman. I'm the Alderman for Ward 3 here in Nashua. I want to thank you for joining us today, and I want to thank my guest, Don Lebrun, Alderman for Ward 5, and a state rep for joining me today as well. And we were here discussing new legislation that is going to give potentially a property tax break to probably the most effective school here in Nashua and the most effective school here in the state. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, please reach us at perspectivesnh@gmail.com, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.